Hello, travelers. Boardman21 here, and today I am here with Vision, a longtime OG of Last Epoch, and he's going to be here, and we're going to bring to you some of the uniques that may have fallen under the radar that could have good synergies with the Warlock class. So, in this setup, we're going to be covering the curses, some of the passives, and just showing you a list of about 15 or so uniques that could have good synergies that have just really not been utilized very well in Last Epoch at the moment, and just kind of our thoughts on a little theory crafting behind it, and just why we think they might fit the class well since it is a curse class coming into the game. But first, let's say hi to Vision. How you doing, Vision?
What's up? I'm not doing too bad, board man. How are you doing?
I am doing great. Excited to start being able to finally do some theory crafting for the Warlock, and then eventually down the road Falconer. But let's go ahead and cover these curses for the Warlock. So most people know that the Warlock coming in is going to be more of like a cursed, like damage over time build, right? That's what it seems like.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, in the first sentence it says Warlock brings much needed curse and damage over time support to the Acolyte, which we've been waiting for. And then we'll have the passive tree and be able to hover over some of these for you guys. But for curses, we have Anguish. I'm going to go ahead and let Vision cover that one.
Anguish is a curse that lasts 10 seconds. It reduces the damage over time dealt by afflicted enemies and deals necrotic damage to all enemies afflicted with it whenever you kill an enemy. So you kind of can spread out the anguish, and when you're killing enemies, then the anguished enemies take more damage then. Cannot stack, though.
Sounds a lot like, kind of like Spirit Plague. So
yeah, it does.
Yeah, I'm kind of excited for that one. I'm wondering if you can stack them both together and like just how powerful that could be.
Yeah, double up on the necrotic.
Yeah, that'll be nutty if you can. Then we got Penance, which is a curse that lasts 15 seconds. This curse causes afflicted targets to take 20 spell fire damage when they are hit another target. Penance does not stack, and I just think that's pretty crazy that this curse that you're afflicting does damage to the enemy when the enemy actually hits a target. So that's when they're hitting you, right?
Yeah, and it looks like it comes from Profane Veil too, so you're like going into a defensive mode and kind of making your own pseudo rebuke, kind of like a retaliate setup. Sounds like it. I know that's a pretty popular archetype too, so I think people might like that.
Yeah, that's definitely one we don't have in the game, or at least if we do, it's very little and not as high ramping as this one. So I'm excited for that one.
Right.
Then we got Decrepify.
Yeah, so Decrepify is a curse that deals 200 physical damage over 10 seconds, so physical dot, with added damage applying at 100% effectiveness per second. And the curse causes the target to take more damage from damage over time effects based on the caster's missing health. So possibly some really nice low life synergy there too for any low life build that's pumping out bleed dots or like any physical dot in general.
Yeah, especially recently with the new exalted affix, or same affix but on exalted items, of even more of your missing life converted to ward. Low lives have become really, really powerful.
Yes.
So that's pretty cool. That 3 curses so far, 3 different ways to play or build around, so that's pretty cool. And then we got Acid Skin, which is a curse which deals 80 poison damage over 5 seconds, with added damage applying at 80% effectiveness per second. This affliction adds a 20% chance for cursed enemies to be critically hit, which reminds me a lot of Critical Strike. Well, what is the word for it on the rogue? That makes him take crits extra hard.
The crit vulnerability.
Yeah, vulnerability, that's right. The one. Yeah, reminds me a lot of like that. And it doesn't say it doesn't stack, so I'm curious if it can or not.
It's kind of interesting too, because poison for the most part is all it's all dot focus. So you don't think too often about critical when you're playing a poison build. And so I think this might have players being a bit more innovative with how they're using poisons, like working the crit in. Because if you're critting with poison damage while you have poison stacks, it's going to hit pretty hard if you can take advantage of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And just reading things like this, it also makes me think a lot more like party play. I've been asked a lot about like co-op play, and I'm wondering like if you just threw Acid Skin into your dot build just to put it on enemies, so like other players with you that are hit builds can go do it. Because it doesn't say that it has to be you doing the hit. It just says for cursed enemies. So I'll be
Might
interested
see the rise of the Warlock support.
Yeah, so that'll be interesting. I'm assuming you could probably fit it in, without building into it too hard.
Right.
And then we got Torment.
Yeah, so Torment's a curse that deals 120 spell necrotic damage over 3 seconds, with added damage applying at 200% effectiveness per second. And it reduces the movement speed of afflicted enemies by 12% in addition to this. It doesn't stack, though, but it seems to be a really good source of damage, kind of like in the same vein of how Spirit Plague works. And maybe you could even see some synergy there with Anguish, too. Also, another curse that's doing necrotic damage. It seems like there's a lot of opportunities here, like with Torment and Spirit Plague, Anguish, a lot of ways to like really pump your necrotic damage over time.
Yeah, and I expect, for the most part, Acolyte is a very necrotic-based class, and spell damage class, so it's not surprising to see a lot of necrotic, but I expect them to synergize really, really well.
Yeah, it's going to be smooth.
Well, sweet. So I'm going to go ahead and hover here over the passive skill tree in case we have any nodes that we think may interact with these uniques. I'm going to pop the uniques up. As you guys can see, we have the Ashes of Mortality sitting there. That's going to be the first one we cover, and I'm going to let the first one be taken by Vision. He's just basically going to go over some theory crafting with it, like how he thinks it might work pretty well with the Warlock class, or just the Acolyte in general.
Yeah, so Ashes of Mortality used to be really popular because of how broken it was. And maybe you remember, Boardman, basically they just added a cooldown onto it, right? I never jumped on the Ashes of Mortality train.
Yep, they did. They added a cooldown so you couldn't just get, a build that was doing tons and tons of hit, just massive amounts of ward from it.
Right, so it lost a little bit of its appeal in terms of like how tanky you can get with it. But Warlock being a class that utilizes a lot of mixtures between fire and necrotic, you can kind of double dip on the fire and necrotic scaling on this item. And especially with like LP to kind of tailor it to what your build needs, it might be just a nice little extra bit of defensive layer that you can work into your build with that ward. And then you're just capitalizing on like cast speed, ward retention's always great, and then also double dipping on the fire and necrotic damage scaling on it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's going to be kind of hidden behind my photo of the Ashes of Mortality, but there's a node. So if you guys have this website open, the link's below in the description. It's called Aspect of the Death. It's the very top left or top right node in the Warlock tree. You can put up to 5 points in it, but this actually, you inflict damned on yourself whenever you or your minions kill a target, or whenever you take a hit. And that damned on yourself, I'm wondering just how well that'll synergize with that mortality where you get ward for that damned on you, 30 per damned. So if you're doing a ton of stacks of damned, it could be a way to bring back more survivability with it.
Right, you're going to see that that's a theme too through some of these uniques, is that Warlocks, it's going to be popular, and a lot of Warlocks are going to be looking to like debuff themselves and just like really raise that more damage that they're going to be able to apply just based on having the negative ailments on them.
Yeah, the last thing that I like is that it has increased fire and necrotic damage, so like it's not only those necrotic spells, but also for the Ignite or for the Penance curse, I think it was, that had the fire spell damage on there, so it seems to have some good synergies there.
Yeah, Warlock's going to be able to really capitalize on that fire and necrotic like nothing else really has at this point.
Yeah, and as a new mastery, I expect it just to feel really good anyways, but it does seem to have some good synergies there that we haven't had.
Right.
And then next we have the Burning Avarice, a unique that I have never worn, but I have found several of them. But this gives you armor, increased cast speed, and then it lets you leech a percentage of elemental damage and necrotic damage as health. And that's not hit damage, or melee damage. That's literally any elemental, which includes fire for ignites, or necrotic damage for all the necrotic curses that we could be doing. And then it also gives you some fire pen with ignite, which is pretty nice. And I think this will have some great synergies for just survivability if you're not playing a low life version.
Right, yeah, just like it's going to be so easy to double dip on those leeches. It's so much leech you can get, and then the leech rate's great too.
Yeah, and that the pen like just gives you a little extra damage in there. The cast speed, so you can apply them faster, and then just leash along with some defense with that elemental resist. Not most builds don't super need that, but you know the acolyte in general usually doesn't get too much out of the tree. So overall I think this could turn into a really nice unique for some builds.
Right, and getting LP on this is not. It's pretty common to get it with LP too, so you can easily like go for a hybrid health on this or whatever else you're trying to do.
Yeah, increased cast speed, hybrid health, another resistance that maybe you're missing, but yeah, lots of options with that one. And then you have the Immolator's Oblation.
Yeah, so this is another item where you're debuffing yourself, a chance to ignite yourself when you use a fire and necrotic skill. And if every skill is not fire, necrotic, and warlock, you can probably, I would say you can convert most of your skills to be both. So a lot of opportunities to ignite yourself and stack up the debuffs for that more damage at the top of the tree. More spell damage for fire and necrotic. One skill that came to mind with this is Ghost Flame, which does both fire and necrotic damage over time. So it's kind of like another way where you can double dip on that spell damage because you're getting it for both fire and necrotic. And you're stacking the ignites, so that's even more spell, fire, and necrotic. I think you'll be able to like ramp with this build ramp with this item pretty well. And also you get the Frenzy whenever you're using a fire necrotic, and wherever you can slip an easy Frenzy into your build. I guess you'd be getting on Transplant. I think most people would, but this is another option of just having the attack and cast speed from Frenzy. Ignite duration, really nice on this item if you're already playing an Ignite build that wants to stack a bunch. And you get a funny little cleanse ailments in there, so you can kind of have control. If the debuffs on your character gets too much, you've got to wait to cleanse them off. You can kind of like play around that window of stacking debuffs, cleansing when you need to, ramping back up. Seems like it'll be fun to play around.
Yeah, that was the first thing that I saw was the ability to control how much damage you're taking. Gets too much, you can just cleanse it. You can get that on most spells that have LP, but the fact that this just comes with it right off the bat, you can use it right off the bat, would definitely make it early leveling or just a new player friendly. And just that fire necrotic damage, you know, that synergy again, where your warlock seems to be mostly based in fire necrotic, just a really good synergy overall.
Yeah, it's going to be so easy to stack that all the way up and then just double dip on it with some of these skills. Yeah. You'll get a lot of value out of that spell damage.
Yeah, which I'm not going to say that we'll see a nerf. I mean, up to 40 spell damage isn't super strong, but for a belt spot where you don't normally get added damage, that could get insane.
That's true.
And then we have Malin's Hubris, which has armor, endurance on it. It has increased fire damage over time, vitality, intelligence, and then 100% of your bleed chance is converted to ignite chance. And one of the reasons this seems like it's going to be really powerful is inside of the Warlock passive tree, you have all these overloads. And you have bleed overloads, you have ignite, you have damned. And because you have bleed and you have ignite, you have a way to basically double dip into ignite if you want it by just having all that extra bleed chance converted over. So these could be pretty powerful gloves.
Right, and the base type for this glove is pretty nice for Acolyte too. You don't really get a lot of free endurance, so I know a lot of the Acolyte builds I make tend to use either the endurance gloves or the void res gloves. And being able to have this on an endurance gloves, it kind of saves you like a suffix slot somewhere. So that helps a little bit with gear pressure. And then also like all of the bleed access you have to as a warlock, being able to convert that to ignite. There's so much room for a player to like play around with this item and how you're actually using it, like, especially with like the overloads, like you were saying too.
Yeah, and then just the last stats on there, even the vitality, intelligence, like gloves you don't normally get vitality on, so having that extra life, intelligence for extra ward retention, like it all just synergizes, I think, really well for Acolyte in general, but especially for the Warlock coming in.
Yeah, that's a really good point about the vitality. This item, it's not super hard to find it with LP either, so you can like throw in a cast speed and get whatever other stats, hybrid health, whatever other stats you'd want to have on your gloves. Kind of tailor it more to your build.
Yeah, no, that's one that I look forward to using. And then we have Soulfire,
Soulfire is such a fun item. I used to use it so much. Basically, you're getting more spell damage to ignited enemies, and there's so many opportunities to apply Ignite with Warlock that you're pretty much, if you're playing that kind of a build, you're always going to have access to that. But it also has 100 to 160% chance to Ignite with Fire skills and Necrotic skills. I don't know if that if your skill is Fire and Necrotic, I don't know if that'll double dip or not, but that would be sick if it does. I'm not actually sure how that was going to work. But increased fire damage if you've killed an enemy recently, so just easy increased damage. This will be more of like a Hungering Souls item. You get 100% of Hungering Souls base damage converted to fire. This way you can play Hungering Souls as a fire build without going into a single soul, like all the way into that. So you can play it as more of a like a spreading, screen clearing kind of setup. Also converts your Hungering Souls to Ignite on hit instead of possessing, which if you're already scaling an Ignite build, I feel like Ignite's way easier to scale than the actual possess of Hungering Souls is. And most importantly, 100% increased armor while ignited. Increased armor is such a good stat, and to have 100% of this when you're pretty much going to have so many ways to apply ignite and debuffs to yourself, it's just going to make you so much tankier to have that access to that armor.
Yeah, all those stats are nuts. That 100% increased armor, though, that's going to be absolutely nuts. I don't know if there's any other piece of gear in the game that actually has 100% on it. And maybe it's because they didn't expect you to be ignited like constantly, so it was going to be like a here and there type thing. But there are ways to do it, and in the passive tree, I don't think you can ignite yourself from the skills. You can damn yourself, but there are ways to get yourself ignited. And then the Hungering Souls ignite on hit instead of possessing. The possess, you could only have one stack on enemies, like they could only possess once. So being able to just get ignite straight on hits instead means you're not wasting any of those Hungering Souls, which is pretty cool. So I could, I don't know if I'll play Hungering Souls, but just this unique in general for the Warlock, for any of its fire and necrotic skills, if you're playing ignite, could be really, really good.
Yeah, it's a nice little sneaky tech to slip in somewhere if you're thinking about a Hungering Souls build.
Yeah. And then we have the Firestarter Torch. This one I've used a few times, a lot with Fireball, especially like leveling up a new mage. But this one gives you added melee spell damage, and that has a chance to apply Spreading Flames on hit, which is really nice early in the campaign because it does enough damage to kill things and it spreads really fast, allowing you for some good AoE early on. And then you get more fire damage to enemies afflicted by Spreading Flames, increased fire damage over time, you get increased movement speed, which is pretty nice, and then it reduces the spell fire mana cost. And the reason this could synergize with the Warlock is because you're already doing a lot of curses and skills like Spirit Plague and I think it was Anguish that can spread around to other enemies. One of the curses could, and that allows you with Spreading Flames just to add another layer in there for multiple things jumping from enemy to enemy, which is pretty cool.
Right, and normally you'd be a little scared to use an item that doesn't have a lot of like spell damage on the implicit, but this is very ignite focused, which just scales with fire. It doesn't scale with the spell damage, so you don't care as much about that. And also, if you're going all in on the fire elemental damage over time, the elemental damage over time prefixes that you can get scale so hard, like the roll range on that's so high, that if you put all of your eggs into the fire elemental damage over time basket, you're getting like the 42 up to 42% more damage for the Spreading Flames enemies, and then all of that ignite, more increased fire damage over time on this. It's a really good way to just juice up that theme of a build. Also, not hard to get LP on this item too, so you can even put more stuff in there, like whatever you would need on a weapon slot.
Yeah, it's pretty nuts. I hope I have one of those drop pretty early for me.
Yeah, that'd be great for Warlock leveling specifically.
Yeah, and then we have the Pyral of Affliction.
This is actually the item that made me start thinking about, oh, there's might actually be a lot of items that have been sitting in my stash that are good for Warlock. And so this item is it's a two-handed weapon, which is, it's not like it's never seen on Acolyte, but it's a lot less common than the staff or wand setup or scepters. But this implicit comes with spell fire damage and spell necrotic, And so it's another one of those things where you can kind of double dip. And what I was looking at in particular was like Ghost Flame doing the fire and necrotic damage. You're getting the spell damage for both of those. I think that's going to be pretty fun to take advantage of. You have a chance to apply Damned on hit. So this item in particular leans a bit more into the Damned side. And speaking of earlier, you were talking about ways to ignite yourself. This item is a way to ignite yourself. So 100% chance to ignite yourself on kill. You're killing a lot of enemies. You're getting like, you're going to have so much uptime on this. I feel like that would be pretty much endless that you have ignite on yourself. So that's a good way to take that. One of the ways that this item has to deal with that too is when you cast Transplant, it converts every stack of ignite on you to damned with 160% increased duration, but you get ward for that. So you can kind of like pop all of your ignites, get the ward, get the big boost of ward, and then you have damned on yourself, so you can kind of manipulate that too. Damned afflicted by spells you cast while damned have extra necrotic pin. Penetration is always good because it's just a straight up more multiplier for whatever setup you're using. In addition to that, there's even more fire and necrotic pin. 20 to 26 fire and necrotic pin. There's just so many ways to get, like, penetration is just always straight up more damage to whatever you're playing. I think there will be some interesting ways to use this item, and if that wasn't enough, 23 to 13% less fire and necrotic damage over time taken. So if you're already playing a build that's stacking a lot of like ignites or damned on yourself, getting that damage reduction is great. Damage reduction in Last Epoch is always an extremely strong stat, but beyond that, even just like running Monolith and getting ignited or whatever else from enemies, standing in a soul cage, something, you're taking less damage over time here, which is great.
Yeah, the one stat that stands out the most to me is converting all of those ignite stacks on you straight to damned, and then once again that Warlock passive aspect of the death where you do more damage per negative ailment on you, including damned. So being able to have that ignite on you, and then when you transplant and get some extra survivability, then turning it into damned. And I don't, depending on how many kills, I assume that's going to be more for like speed running and having mob density to get lots of stacks of that ignite. But that's, you can get, you know, that more damage multiplier in that node I think is going to be heavily used by most builds.
Yeah, I would be curious to see too, if you're playing a build with a lot of like intelligence and ward retention, I am curious to see how much ward you can actually get. Like if you get like just a massive burst of ward when you're transplanting. Like if you play a build that can really capitalize on that, just like get a massive extra HP shield on top of whatever your HP bar.
Yeah. Yeah, that's going to be nice. That's definitely one that I'd like to use. And then we have Chronicle of the Damned, which gives you int, cast speed as it's implicit. It gives you plus levels to Hungering Souls, Wandering Spirits, and you get ward gained per active Wandering Spirit every second that they are active. And then you have a chance to inflict damned on hit with Hungering Souls per active Wandering Spirit, while also having a chance to reveal a Wandering Spirit on kill that does have a 1 second cooldown. So again, just another unique that has a way of scaling with damned and just getting more ward and survivability. I would say, I don't know if this one has to be played with Warlock. I know that it's already been played on some Wandering Spirit builds that are in the game, but overall I think it's a pretty cool unique.
Right, yeah, people have played with this before using Wandering Spirits. What kind of drew my attention for this too is, I know there's some Wandering Spirits support floating around maybe, or if not even, Wandering Spirits is a necrotic damage over time, so it's also going to go along with your Spirit Plague, with your Torment, with your Anguish. How we were saying earlier that you can kind of just go all in on the necrotic dot. The Wandering Spirits is going to be another just necrotic dot to have in your arsenal.
Yeah, that's pretty nutty. And then we have Marina's Lost Soul.
Yeah, so this has been pretty popular already on Deathseal Lich. When you're damned when you cast a spell when you have this item. So already you can see kind of the theme here. You're stacking a lot of damned on yourself and getting that more damage building up. There's a little bit of There's a spell necrotic on the implicit, and then there's also spell necrotic as one of the just base modifiers. So you can get quite a bit of spell necrotic damage on this item. You get the increased curse damage, and obviously we have a lot of curses and a lot of curses that deal damage. So you can kind of, it's up to 66% on that. So that's just like a little additional way to ramp up your curses. Necrotic necrotic penetration with possess per stack of damned on you. So if you're damning yourself when you cast a spell, if you're playing like a really spammy spell where you can get a lot of damned stacks, and you're playing just like a traditional Hungering Souls build, there could be a lot of ways to scale this or just take advantage of it with Warlock in general.
Yeah, that up to 140% necrotic pen when you have up to 7 of those stacks of damned on you, which should be pretty easy with all the different ways we're seeing in those passives. That's a big more damage multiplier for you. And then the implicit having
nasty.
having that increased curse damage. It has a good amount for a one-hander of spell necrotic damage already. So, and then some added on the modifiers. Like without even LP, this is already a very, very powerful one-handed weapon. So I'm excited for that.
Yeah, I think this will be fun. Yeah, it's going to be fun to play around with.
Then we have the Bleeding Heart. And this one's more of just kind of a generic one. This is put in there because bleeds are based in Warlock as well. You have like bleed overload. So the one cool thing about this is you can leech any damage you do at all, whether it's damage over time, hit damage, anything. It's going to be leeched as health, which is going to really help you for survival if you're placing, you know, a lot of dams and things on you. As long as you can leech more of the damage that you're doing, it'll help keep you alive. And then, of course, this one has the ability to inflict bleed on you when you are whenever you cast the spell. So just another way to inflict yourself with a negative ailment that's going to give you more damage, again with that aspect of Death Node that we keep bringing up.
Yeah, Bleeding Heart has always been a popular item for dot builds that need a form of sustain. So as long as you're not playing a spammy dot build, people love Bleeding Heart, because if you're not spamming a lot, you're not getting a lot of those bleeds, but you are getting the dot leech. So if you're putting out a lot of dots, it's a good way to leech. Bleeding Heart has been played with quite a bit, but now in particular the Warlock likes having debuffs on them, so you don't care about the bleeds as long as you can like offset the damage, which Warlock will have tools to do that. And anyway, you're leeching. Bleeding Heart, get your Bleeding Hearts out of your stash, your 1-2 LP Bleeding Hearts, and throw this on a Warlock and just have a massive sustain with this.
Yeah, I'm going to be curious because remember, you're getting 0.5% more damage per negative ailment stack on you. So between the Damned, Ignite, and Bleed, if you're able to get, say, 200 stacks between all 3 of those on you and survive through that, you're doing 100% more damage with everything that you do, which is pretty nuts.
That's going to be great.
And then we have the Blood of the Exile.
Yeah, Blood of the Exile I looked at, and what I had in mind for this would be on more of like a monolith farmer type build, because basically what this is doing is you're doing more physical ailment damage to moving enemies, so it's going to be a build where you're going to want to always be moving forward and kiting enemies behind you. But and also you have like bleed duration on it, so this will be on like this is a potential item for a bleed Warlock mapper. Especially if you can find some LP on this. It will be a little bit harder to get LP on this item, but it's a possible tech you can do on like a physical bleed scaling Warlock that's interested mainly in like pushing monoliths fast and letting enemies die behind you.
Yeah, that extra bleed duration that's on there is pretty insane too, for applying the bleeds and then being able to just keep running forward while things will likely die as they follow you.
Yeah, it's not an item that's been used much either, but I think Warlock has potential at least to like take advantage of it.
Yeah, if you got a bleed build and you got room in the boot section to put a unique on, why not? Then we have Valdir's Chalice, which gives you 100% of damage you take reflected, but then the big things, you have chance to bleed on hit, you have increased bleed duration, and you leech a portion of that physical damage over time, bleed in this case, which is pretty insane. And then to heal yourself pretty well, you can also get 20 health gain per stack of bleed on the target when you kill them. So overall, again, for if you're going bleed based Warlock, if you're planning on playing any of that bleed overload, this could be another really good one for survivability as well as increased offense.
Warlock's loving access to all of these ways to leech dots. That physical damage over time leech is going to be pretty nice if you're playing this type of build. And then if that leech wasn't enough, you get 20 health gained on kill per stack of bleed. And if you're playing a Warlock build that's stacking bleed, you're going to be able to get a lot of health back that way too, because you're going to be stacking a lot of bleeds. Bleed duration always nice, and then just like to additionally support that with the bleed on hits, great. It's just like an all-around nice tool for a bleed setup.
Yeah, it's pretty nuts. And then we have the Salt the Wound.
All right, Salt the Wound was a classic item with Rogue. So basically, added crit multi that you're getting is being converted to physical pen, and it's also being converted to poison pen. So the penetration is more damage for your bleed and poison. They both have separate roll ranges, but anyway. This item itself has crit multi, so you're getting a little bit of support for that kind of concept where you're shifting your crit multi into more dot damage instead. You've got some really good physical and poison res. I mean, normally you don't want to put the resistances on your gloves because you're trying to like put other stuff there like hybrid health and armor shred, cast speed. But being able to roll up to 45% can save you suffixes in other places and maybe even prevent you from like taking certain blessings on a character. But I think there's going to be a lot of support for the crit multi in particular, and the Warlock's going to be able to use this pretty well because there's a lot of crit multi up in the Warlock, the top of the Warlock tree. So you get 40% from Wreak Havoc just at a baseline, but then you can get an extra 30% crit multi from utilizing the node before it, which is double damage chance. So on the hits where you proc the double damage, you're getting even more crit multi on that, and it's just gonna like, it's gonna push the damage on these dots so much further. It's gonna be overkill, the combination of all of this.
Yeah, it's pretty nuts. I mean, I almost wish I had increased bleed and ignite instead of poison. Then it would be perfect. Yeah. But I still think that it could find its way into some Warlock builds. And then we have
the damage. If you could, oh, I'm sorry. I was just gonna say if you can find a way to make that work, the damage is gonna be there.
Oh yeah, it'll be nuts. That pen is always very strong. But yeah, then we have Life's Journey, which gives you block chance, block effectiveness like a normal shield. It has increased physical damage, which can help you with the bleeds. You lose a percentage of your current health per second. You gain health on block, and then you have a chance to apply Spirit Plague on melee hits. So it'll be just kind of a way to, if you're already playing a build that has those curses that are spreading through enemies, that just by throwing a shield on, and you're playing a melee build with Harvest or something going on in there, that you won't actually have to have Spirit Plague on your skill bar, and you can still spread it around as well just for a little extra damage.
Yeah, I saw this item and the first thing I thought of was, hey, Chaos Bolts can proc Harvest. You have a % chance based on your dexterity to proc Harvest. And I was thinking, well, what if you just run around with this shield? You don't have to use Harvest, you just Chaos Bolt and make Chaos Bolt Harvest. You don't have to be a melee build to take advantage of this. And then so that's an easy way to like a proc chain to get Spirit Plague out and spreading. I think maybe there's something funny you can do with that. And I'm pretty sure you won't need Spirit Plague on your bar. So if you want like an unspec'd transplant for some reason or something like that, you can kind of... you'll have like wiggle room for an unspec'd skill there that you could just like use the base utility of.
Yeah, that's pretty nice. And if I recall, based on your int too, you can have Chaos Bolt do Rip Blood, I believe it was.
Oh yeah.
So you could have Rip Blood go off, you could have the Harvest go off, and then you can have the Harvest apply the Spirit Plague, and all those hits are doing the curses. Like, it sounds like it could become, you know, absolutely just full of procs.
Yeah, Chaos Bolt's going to be silly about that. It's going to be like Factorio building your factory of all these weird procs that are going off every time I cast this one skill. I think it's going to be pretty fun.
Yeah, it should be pretty nuts. And then we have a trophy.
Yeah, so Atrophy, it's got slow on hit, and slow duration, chance to slow attackers. So there's some slow there. Increased time rot duration. You're not going to be taking advantage of time rot. What caught my eye, though, was the 20 to 25% pin against all resistances for damage over time. And I thought, there's so much... if you're doing like a build with quadruple dot types, this is such a valuable way to get penetration for all of those. I was putting together a planner where I was just imagining what my Warlock would look like with Fire Pen. If I was playing like a Fire Necrotic build, and I was like, I don't want to put penetration on both my amulet slots. For that, Atrophy is a way to just like, okay, I've got all of the dot pin now. So, especially if you get this with LP and you're doing like multiple types of dots, this is just a way to get more damage with that.
Yeah, the fact that that pen is for all resistances is pretty nuts, especially if you're doing bleed, poison, ignite, damned. If you're doing all the types, like, it's pretty cool that you can get all of that in one spot and a pretty big number of it.
Yeah. More than you'd get on your amulet prefix by quite a bit, like triple, almost.
Yeah, that's pretty nuts. And then the last one that we have is the Ghost Maker, which I've always wanted to do something around, but just haven't. But this can give you ward gain on kill, necrotic damage for damage over time spells, which right there should be telling you why we want it for the Warlock. You have a chance to cast Summon Raise when one or more of your raise, or when one of you, when you are one of your wraiths, kill an enemy. Chance to cast Infernal Shade when you are one of your wraiths, kill an enemy. And then more Infernal Shade damage per active wraith against bosses and rare enemies, as well as increased area for Infernal Shade and for the Summon Raise melee attacks. But the thing that stands out the most here is that necrotic damage for the damage over time spells is kind of crazy. And I haven't dived into the skill trees too much or the passives too much, but I believe there was some minion support in there a little bit. So being able to build possibly around that with your raise for some damage. I know Harvest and its skill tree has minion support, so you could be having that be procced and possibly have your raise doing extra damage. So I think it could scale with a minion build or a hybrid build, or even just straight necrotic damage over time build.
Yeah, there's Warlock does have a little bit of minion support floating around, and also Infernal Shade support, surprisingly enough. And Infernal Shade has traditionally been a skill that's really hard to scale, but if anybody's going to take advantage of it, it's going to be Warlock with all of this damage over time. Just like so much damage over time setup, Ignite, Elemental, and then like you were pointing out, the minion support too. There might be a way to scale up Infernal Shade as a damage source, and then also take advantage of like the rest of the kit that this Ghost Maker has to offer.
Yeah. It's going to be nice to see what people come up with a lot of these older uniques that have been in the game for a long time and kind of fallen under the radar. But yeah, you got anything else you'd like to add, or?
No, I think that's about it. Hopefully, I'm going to be curious to see if I'm sure this isn't all of the uniques, so I'm kind of curious if anybody else has any other ideas that they're cooking up. And also, I'm just ready to see, like, man, Warlock so far looks way too big brain for me, and I'm gonna need you guys to teach me how to play it. So, any cool ideas you find with these uniques, I'm gonna be interested.
Yeah, there's going to be tons of new synergies coming in. Obviously, you know, you're introducing, I think it's 30-something new passives. You have 5 new skills. Like, you know, I'm sure there'll probably even be new uniques that come. I haven't seen any that have been teased, but yeah.
I'm sure we'll see idols too.
Yeah, idols, new affixes, like all the different stuff that's going to come in. There's going to be lots of people finding new interactions. But like he said, there's probably a ton of uniques that can also fit in here. We didn't cover all of them. Obviously, we didn't want to turn this into like a 4-hour video. So if there's a unique you think will do really well, feel free to comment it below and your ideas in it and why you think that interaction would be strong. But that's going to be it for guys. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you next time.